Hey, this is Marv Wolfman, co-creator of the Teen Titans, and you're listening to 11 O'Clock Comics.
Excellent.
I feel good about tonight. There's a reason.
Well, we always have a reason.
Oh, we always have a reason, but tonight is really special.
Extra super secret special reason.
Something.
Yeah. Jack would have called him, hey, you brought one of them big brains in. Good job. Yeah, the banter is lively.
Oh, it's on and popping.
I always think of corn whenever you say that for some reason.
Oh, busted.
That's where the brain goes.
With a K?
No.
Oh, geez.
No.
Thank you.
I hope no one thinks of corn as a can. 2023.
Yes. One thing I pride myself on is my excellent taste in music, and I am happy to say that corn is not in that vocabulary.
Seriously.
We hope that you were in your vocabulary. Mine is obviously dysfunctional right now, but because this is 11 O'Clock Comics, episode 873. Wow. And I'm Vince B.
You are Vince B. We're nearing the road to 900. Goddamn. I am David A. Price.
Indeed you are. And of course, I am everyone's favorite little brother, Larry Lieber.
Aww. Poor Larry. You're not Larry Lieber. You're Jason Wood, everybody. Little Birdie told me we have a guest this week.
We do. Making his triumphant return. I don't know how many times this gentleman's been on the show, but it has been a minute. I think it's at least pre-pandemic, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
But in a way, he and his work is somewhat synonymous with the show, I would argue, because he's one of the first creators that we talked up in a big way and befriended right in the show's earliest days, thanks to a little book named Godland, which we all adored. He, of course, went on to do many other amazing things, many of which he's come on the show to talk with us about over the years, including Transformers vs. G.I. Joe, a Fantastic Four Grand Design, and he is on tonight to talk about the second of his amazing projects with 10 Speed Press. The first was, of course, Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, back in 2020, and back again, soon to be, hopefully in many of your hands, it's already in ours, is I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. I am, of course, thrilled to have back with us on the show Mr. Tom Scioli.
Hey, guys. Great to be back.
Yes, sir. Welcome back.
Nice. We're all glad to have you, just not Jason. You know.
I fake it pretty good, though, right?
That intro was taking me back because, it feels like I've known you guys forever. And, I remember, I forget what show it was, some convention, and then somebody was saying to me, oh, those guys over there, they're podcasters. And I'm like, what? What's that? And now, everybody's a podcaster, but you guys were on the cutting edge.
It is true.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for CGS, though. So
that is fact.
Got to give the propers.
Yeah.
Yep. Speaking of propers, this episode is brought to you by cheapgraphicnovels.com. It's right there in the name, people, cheapgraphicnovels.com. If you want to save big on omniboo, collected editions, manga, everything that has covers and is thick, why, you just go to cheapgraphicnovels.com and you'll save massively. Remember, place an order, buy something, or a couple somethings. Don't overdo it because there's a method to my madness here. Buy something and you will receive an email verification saying, hey, thank you for your order. You are going to reply, yes, to that email verification saying 11 O'Clock Comics sent me, and you will be gifted with free shipping on your next order. That's insane. That is when you tank up. You get the massive omnibus, you get 20 of them, whatever. Just go crazy because the shipping is free. So cheapgraphicnovels.com, the best, period.
Have you guys, have either of you availed yourselves of the Cheap Graphic
the
Novels?
free ship? Oh, yeah. Well, yes. I recently received the the first then book because for some reason I missed it when I ordered. I ordered the second one. When I ordered the second one, I was like, "That's weird." So Max was kind enough to fill that void, as well as the small size Spider-Gwen trade. I was missing the one right before the latest one, so I had some gaps to fill, and he was happy to take care of that for me. So yeah, I have ordered. I have not taken advantage yet of the free shipping.
You shouldn't take advantage of it. That's nuts. Why? No.
No?
We're.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Whatever.
Well, in his
I'm
defense,
saying
he
I
hasn't taken advantage of it. So.
Right, I haven't made a second order yet that would allow me to take advantage of it if it was an option. I'm just saying that yes.
Right.
To answer Jason's question, yes, I've made a purchase recently, but I haven't made a second one.
Nice.
Where the shipping would be available.
Right. I get too much from them. Too much. But it's wonderful. So yes, let's do the drink roll call. Why don't we?
Okay.
I have nothing of note. It's just water with blackberry lemonade in it.
Now, did you put the blackberry and lemonade in it?
No.
Because that'd be kind of fancy.
Put the lime in the coconut.
I am not fancy. If you want me to drink it with my pinky out, I will. But it's just water.
Okay. Well, I am having a citrus yuzu smash White Claw in honor of our guest.
Wow, Tom, that's big doings because he rarely drinks.
Yeah, that I'm with you because I have decaf coffee right here, so that's that's as tame as it gets.
Yeah, these drink roll calls are the biggest proof ever of how long we've been doing the show.
Seriously,
we used to like, yo, I got a bullet neat with this, chasing it with the sixer, and it's like, I have a fine distilled dry drip coffee, and yeah.
Yes, now I'm drinking battery acid this week. That was back in the day, not anymore.
We're getting old. Third.
Tap, what are you drinking?
Listen, man, I had a nice glass of Pinot with dinner, and when I finished it, I was like, you know what? I'm good. And now I am just going to chug it to this big ass barrel of water that I have next to my desk.
Wow, this is bizarro. So I'm the only one of us that's having an alcoholic beverage.
It's
freaky.
insane. So it's so weird.
If you want to call that an alcoholic beverage, yes.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Hold on. All right, it's 100 calories, so it's not very caloric. But wait a minute.
It's got as much alcohol as hand sanitizer.
It's about 5%.
Is that what it is?
I think so.
Oh yeah, it's 5% alcohol.
Yeah. Not bad. It'll kill some germs, but not many. Yeah.
Boom.
All right, enough of this. I want to talk to Tom.
Yes, that's what we're here.
Yes. And Tom, I wasn't joking when I said Kirby would refer to you as a big brain, because in preparation for this, I put the Jack Kirby book, Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, next to the Stan book, which for those of you playing at home is called I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And you are so smart because the Kirby book, the title of which is just a title. It was written, it's just stating this is Jack Kirby and this is his life. The Stan title is in the first person. I am Stan. This is me, right? But if you read both books in tandem, the Kirby book is written in the first person, as if Jack were telling you about his life. And the Stan book is written as if you were a little fly on the wall observing all of these incidents that encompassed his life. That is, you blew my mind with that. Was that intentional?
Well, I mean, Stan is like, his story is a much more external story, and Jack's is a much more like internal story. Aside from World War II,
Right.
World War II is very, action-packed kind of, Jack Kirby style, like the kind of comic Jack Kirby would make. But yeah, the rest, it's such an internal journey. And where Stan, you can see him like jumping on his desk and things like that, where Kirby he'd just like be at that desk concentrating super hard, and like just, his wrist would be moving or whatever, but you wouldn't quite be aware that there was like that much going on, unless you were like inside his head or looking at, what was going on like on that piece of paper. But yeah, the Stan book it's not like, it's not like his diary or told in the first person, but I really like wanted to embody Stan Lee with that book. So it's almost like it's the book saying I am Stan, like
Right.
that,
Yeah.
getting the Stan Lee experience out of it.
And Stan was so conscious of the way he was perceived and grabbing as much of the limelight as he possibly could. I totally agree, as if it matters, with the title I Am Stan, because Stan is the guy that actually stepped in front of the cameras. He was the cheerleader, the ringmaster that got us all enthusiastic about Marvel Comics. And Jack was the storyteller. And I thought, man, this is so smart to take these two different approaches to what I'm guessing are companion volumes, right?
For sure, yeah. They definitely speak to each other and sort of create a third narrative.
It was a journey, my man. I'm not joking when I say that you are on a real short list. Maybe two people that can ever get me to actually read a Stan Lee,
Right?
chronic.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me too, because I had a couple people saying, because I know a lot of people in sort of like the Jack Kirby fandom, and that's sort of a community that I'm part of too. And I was kind of surprised, people saying like, "Oh yeah, I don't know, I don't know if I could buy a Stan Lee book."
Yeah,
Well,
I mean I'll go ahead.
No, to your credit, though, you played it as expected, very, very smart, because no matter what side of the fan base or that you fall on, either you're a fan or not, there's plenty in this book to fuel fires on both sides.
Sure, yeah,
It's not a scathing diatribe against Stan. It's not you don't regale him with as a super being. It's just you stated the information in a dynamic way that kind of feeds both sensibilities. And I thought, man, it's great to read that, because obviously I was loving the incidents that render Stan in not so wonderful a light, but then there's plenty in here that do, right?
Yeah, that's the point I was going to say, is that reading this, I was, I don't know if impressed is the word, but pleased, I guess, to see how straight down the middle you this read. I mean, it didn't read like it had an agenda. Not to say that I thought you would necessarily have an agenda, but it's my opinion that most documentaries and biographies, whether they be written or drawn or filmed, are generally do take on some kind of agenda of the director, whether it's intentional or not. And knowing you for as long as we have, and knowing what an unabashed Kirby fan you are, I was thinking it would be a little bit more pointed. And so, what I'd love to, I mean, listen, this is by 10 Speed as well. Like you said, it's a companion book to the Kirby book. When you did the Kirby book, we were all like, "Oh, that makes sense. That's on brand, right?" Like, of course, like if there's who else should do a Jack Kirby biocomic than Tom? But then doing this again as a companion piece, it makes sense. But like, did you have to give this thought? Was this just a natural follow up? Like, did they approach you? Did you approach them? I'm curious how this came to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's like just an incredibly natural follow up, and they did approach me, after I finished the Jack Kirby book. And I was like, no, like I'm not interested in doing a Stan Lee book. And again, like I was, spent all that time in that Jack Kirby world, telling the Jack Kirby story, and spent a lot of time, in Stan Lee's world by extension. So I was just kind of worn out. Like, by the end of that book, I just was not. I needed some time, but as maybe a year or so, like as time went on, I did kind of. The seed was planted, and this, approach and this just almost like daydreaming, this kind of like approach to telling Stan's story, kind of came to me, and I kind of built on it. And then, it reached a point where I'm like, okay, yeah, I absolutely have to do this Stan Lee book. So I needed time, and I needed, kind of the right approach. to it, and then it just made all the sense in the world. And yeah, looking back, it's like, oh, if I had, if this was some sort of master plan or something, it would have been perfect. Because yeah, if I started with a Stan Lee book, it kind of would have been like, okay, why is Tom doing a Stan Lee book? But a Jack Kirby book, completely natural. And then it's like, oh well, of course, you do a Jack Kirby book, of course your next book is going to be Stan Lee. So it really built a bridge to the next one. But it wasn't like, I never in a million, like, if you would have asked me like, oh, if you want to do a Stan Lee book, like, it was just, the furthest thing from my mind. But,
Well, that's interesting to hear, because then to me, the result it would be much more organic and natural than if you just set out to just make a companion book to the Kirby thing just because. Right. Well, I have a Kirby book. I got to do a Stan book, but you didn't see it coming, and yet it happened. Which
it was. I mean, it was incredibly natural, and I think like a lot of it kind of came out of just contemplations of like mortality and age, just like the story of a life, of somebody going from, this sort of young, plucky character to this, complicated, older character, and just a lot of the sort of the dark side of the Stan Lee story. It just kind of like, I started seeing it as, and again, like the final book isn't this, but in the process of kind of, working through it and thinking about it, I was kind of seeing it as like, ooh, like a Citizen Kane kind of story, or Slaughterhouse-Five or something. Like that was kind of where I started, and that's how a lot of projects are. A lot of projects start off where you kind of have this thought of like, ooh, it could be this, and then as you like dive in and pick away and work at it, then it becomes like what it becomes. But those were some of the gateways into Stan's story for me.
Did you, since you have spent so much time in the Kirby ethos, and obviously, like you said, I'm sure that book came naturally to you, and you can't be big into Kirby's life and influences without knowing a lot about Stan, at least from one angle. Did you have to take a certain tact for the research of this book, either to make sure you were being fair and balanced, or to, like, where did you have to fill in the blanks? What was the research process like for this in comparison to the Kirby book?
Yeah, I mean, to be like fair and balanced and stuff, like that was mainly just, and I tried to do this, in a lot of aspects of the book, but just kind of take myself out of the equation, just kind of, remove me as much as possible from it and just observe, just, research and report back, and try really hard not to editorialize. And of course, that it's almost impossible to like completely, not editorialize, but, to the best of my ability, I tried to take myself out of it. And for the difference between the research for the Jack book and this is like just that I'm kind of, I mean, I have my preferences in terms of like Kirby's work, and so I know sort of more about certain things, like certain comics, like his 70s work, his 60s work, and the and the biography of like what was going on in his life around those times. Like those were sort of my areas of expertise, but I like all Kirby's stuff, and I have like a lot of knowledge about it. Like every era of his stuff. Whereas with Stan, my knowledge going into it was sort of, it's like, okay, I'm way into this stuff, I'm way into this period, and then other parts of his life and his work were just kind of like big question marks to me. So I had to, that was where a lot of the research was sort of catching up. Like, okay, what was Stan Lee up to in the 40s and 50s? What was Stan Lee up to in the 2000s and the 2010s and stuff? Like those, and of course, I mean, Kirby didn't make it into the 2000s, so there's that too. Just Stan having sort of a much longer life. But yeah, there were I went into it sort of like an expert in certain aspects, and then just a completely like a blank slate for other things.
Right. In trying to come up with questions for you for this thingamajig, I found myself in your position. I had to really try very hard not to editorialize, right? Not to put a slant on it, because you know where I fall in this side of the right. So I'm trying to get something where it's like, I didn't want to say, well, because Stan was a thieving scumbag, did this, you know what I mean? Like I had to stop and pull away and say, well, a lot of these scenes that you include in this book, they really speak for themselves. You don't have to editorialize. Like, there's only one way to read Stan entering the bullpen with a whip, right? Pretending to lash at his artists to produce more. Like that, I can understand from his perspective how he thought that might have been funny. But if you're in the seat and you got the drawing table in front of you, that's not funny at all. It's kind of in bad taste too. But I like the way that you didn't put any spin on it. You're just like, this is what happened, and perceive it as only the way the events can be perceived, right? Or again, that may be me leaning into it a little bit, right?
There's scenes that speak for themselves, and there's also, when you're putting together a book like this, there's certain moments where you're like, okay, I gotta put that in, like that has to go in here, and that was something that kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I'd heard references to it, here and there, and I just assumed it was like a metaphor or something. But then I'm finding these, there was like a documentary, and there were a couple like written accounts where like they were absolutely serious. Like Stan really did this, and it's, it would be easy to assume like that version of Stan, what like that he was doing that in the 60s and 70s too. But no, there was like a very it's like a moment in time of like this sort of infant king Stan, where it was like right after the war when he came back full time in the offices as editor. He was like a tiny tyrant. Like he was just had all this like bound up energy and kind of passive aggressive anger or something, and was just kind of a little bit of a monster for a moment, and then it was like he got it out of his system. He was like cured of it, or at least like the most sort of surface aspects of it. But that was eye opening. And again, I'd heard some like stories here and there, but it is just a specific moment in time. And then for whatever reason, he kind of, I don't see how you could carry on that kind of behavior indefinitely,
Mm-hmm. What, if anything, Tom, as you were putting this together, surprised you? That you were like, oh, I didn't, like, that really kind of, did anything take you back and say, oh, wow, that I had no idea. Was there any of that?
Yeah, sometimes there were some, some of the early comics that he worked on, at the very, very beginning were kind of like, ooh, that's a lot better than I thought it would have been. Like, he did come into there with a lot of talent. He was like, I was looking for like a smoking gun. I was looking for like some kind of thing where it's like, okay, here is Stan Lee genius, at, like an early age. And like, I didn't find anything like that, but like his stuff was pretty solid. And when he takes over, like writing Captain America and stuff after Joe Simon and Jack Kirby leave, there's some pretty strong material in there. Like it's not at the level of like the Simon and Kirby stuff, but he didn't do too bad, following in their footsteps.
And did you find yourself, you mentioned like when you were first kind of putting all this together, you thought of the whole Citizen Kane angle, and it didn't end up being that per se, but I did find it, I found it gratifying and endearing a bit that the way you ended the book, where you take us on what's certainly, no matter where you sit with the Stan debate, a very sad end to his life. I think a guy that lived his life with such vibrance and larger than life was like many elderly people taken advantage of pretty horribly towards the end. And I really think you captured that. And it doesn't sound like you were super plugged into Stan's goings on in his later years. So were you surprised by that, or was that a conscious choice to make sure that was captured in the book? Because obviously you could write a Stan biography about his career without necessarily going there.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the important things that made me want to do a Stan Lee book. Like if it had just been sort of happily ever after for Stan Lee and stuff, that's a different kind of story. But the weirdness and the tragedy of his last days make it just it kind of blows my mind, and it just I still can't get past it. It kind of just change it. It completely changes, the story of Stan Lee's life. Stan Lee was one of these sort of, American success stories, and whether you love him or hate him or whatever, it's maybe you resent his success and happiness or whatever, or maybe you're cheering for him or whatever, but it's not that story, anymore. Once all those videos started surfacing and stuff, it's okay, this is now it's like a David Lynch film or something, where where before it would have been like a I don't know, Rags to Riches or whatever, like one of those Horatio Alger kind of stories.
Well, you infused the book with a sense of foreboding right from the beginning, like with the person directing Stan S.T.A. Like it's the first page of the book, and it's very Lynchian in that there's a shadow over it. So you're reading the about 3/4 into it, right? And if you didn't know the life of Stan, you wouldn't understand that first page. But then you see where it starts to go, and it's like, oh man, you clued us in right from the beginning that this is going to go south at the end, right? Because he's obviously older, and he's signing, and he doesn't know how to sign his own name, and that again, I have feelings for Stan, because I have to admit the guy changed my life immeasurably. As a kid, I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't care what was going on. All I knew was that there's this guy who's telling me Marvel Comics are cool, that it's the place to be. It's a club where, you can come in, there's plenty of room. Here's what we have coming up, and the alliteration. To this day, I can't shake alliteration when I write. And that is directly a product of Stan. So, I can get all, puff my chest up and say, I don't like Stan. But I do like Stan. I like, in terms of your book, I like that character of Stan that we were all introduced through the comics, right? And that's in the book. So I was like, oh, this part's great. And then, the stuff we didn't know back then that we do know now, that starts to bubble to the surface. And then, it became, so there are many, and I like the way you did this, where you have different age periods of Stan in like a Warholian montage with just a flat color. And I thought that was beautiful. And it's like, here's the bald Stan, here's the Stan with the wig, here's an older Stan. It's that section is just impeccable. I love it. But that's how Stan is. There are many Stans to all of us. I like to focus on the ringleader, the guy that was the champion of Marvel Comics and made it seem so cool to read this stuff. And it was cool, right? I always go back to Chris Bichello and his depiction of Stan from the Excalibur, right? When Stan was leaning over the podium with the top hat on and the glasses, he's like, step right up. Like, that's Stan to me, right? Regardless of any of the other stuff, which, you have to put on the back burner when reading or consuming something about the life of a person who kind of strikes you a lot of different ways. So, I may be overlapping with what Jason asked you, but was there some events that you didn't include where you're just like, no, I can't do this. This is just, no, I can't put this in the book because it's just, it's leaning towards one side a little too heavily.
Yeah, there wasn't. Yeah, I can't think of anything like that where I was like, oh, this would be too nasty or something. That stand that you're talking about, that sort of, like who I started, when I was a kid and stuff, and like what I thought Stan was this sort of, the Hans Christian Andersen of the 20th century or something, with a little bit of P.T. Barnum thrown in, like that guy, that character, like that's, that is, really like compelling and warm and stuff.
Yep.
But the sort of like more complicated Stan is actually like from a literature point of view or whatever, like that's an incredibly engaging kind of character. That is kind of, like a little bit of a trickster, a little bit, a little bit of like that just again it's just those kind of characters and those kind of people, like in a fiction or whatever, are like the ones that you can't take your eyes off of. So
right.
So like that Stan is, is great, fodder for a book, like for a narrative, even a nonfiction narrative. Like you kind of can't take your eyes off of them, and it's not like in spite of the flaws. Sometimes the flaws are, they're part of, what makes them irresistible.
Right. I completely agree. The showman, the carnival barker, that's a pretty one-note character, as compelling as it was. I mean, he had me completely convinced as a kid, but the more layered, older, more experienced Stan is a much more interesting character. I agree with that. Yeah.
The obviously, the notes section in your book is wonderful for you citing your sources, and obviously there are, even though, because different books will go through different facets of his life, you'll see, the what is it, with great power, Stanley's story, or Excelsior, the amazing life, you'll see it throughout the whole book, where they're like, just how much of the reference material did you actually have on hand ready to start with this, or did you actually have to run out and do? I mean, I would imagine some of it you would have had left over from the Jack book, but how much of this did you kind of already know, and did you just needed to reinforce, or you went out and found the Tomorrow's magazines, the various books, the various YouTube interviews, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it was kind of the same with Jack Kirby, where it's like I knew the story, like, and if I had to, I could sit down and just make, a graphic novel of Jack Kirby's life or Stanley's life. I could sit down and it would, like I could do it, but it's like when you're actually doing it, it's like, okay, I got to make sure, I got to check and double check and make sure, that I'm, make double sure about this and that. And so yeah, it was a lot of like, which is sort of why, like, I can't imagine somebody making a book. Like, you kind of have to come from our community. Like, you kind of have to be somebody who's like really versed in this to like really do the material justice, because like we kind of have this built-in like decades of preparation, where it's like I didn't realize I was spending decades preparing for a Stanley book, but I really was. Like I really did have all this stuff at my fingertips and kind of know the basic shape of the story, and then I could sort of fill in the detail, like, and then sort of knew where to look, where to go to like find out, like, okay, yeah, I got this hole over here that I need to fill, and this over here. So yeah, it was like I had a lot of this stuff was like already on my bookshelves, and then there was a lot of just maxing out my library card and ordering stuff and and just just hoovering up everything I could get.
Right. The one of the things that really surprised me is how important, how crucial Joan is, or was, to Stan's success, because she was a constant. She was his rock. When he started to waver, she just like, well, why don't you just do it your way? And I got to say, when she passes, that's a rough panel to experience. Like, you got to feel for the guy. And then you see after Joan leaves the picture, things start to get really bad for him.
Yeah, I mean, that is really when he started getting taken advantage of. She was sort of the gatekeeper in that way, and yeah, for sure.
And I do remember some of the headlines or stories where there was issues between Stan and his daughter Joni, and I didn't realize, based on how whatever amount of depth you want to say gets into it in this book, I didn't realize that it was as serious as it was than just maybe the gossip mill talking about just some tiff within a family, but it seemed pretty harsh.
Yeah, Stan had like a small world. Like he had a lot of like friends, a lot of this and that, but like a very small circle of confidants. And it really what like he and Joan were like she was his world. Like she was sort of the one person he'd sort of really open up to, and he definitely put her on a pedestal, and they were a good match in a lot of ways, and then in some way, like they kind of had sort of overlapping blind spots, you might say, or like it was an interesting chemistry. But yeah, and of course, like who couldn't relate to that? Like that he's got this significant other who means the world to him, and then yeah, like when she dies. I mean that's a lot of people's story, where things just not necessarily in this exact form, but where you lose that partner, and it's just like a quick tumble after that.
Right. You made me feel for him. Damn you.
Yeah, I mean, just from one human being to another. Like, I mean, it's as time goes on, I just find it so much easier to just be empathetic, to like, to other people's stories, and like that. What maybe 20 years ago, it might have been a little snarky or something, but yeah, it's like I just from one person to another. I was just in the making of this book, I was kind of getting emotional, just sort of thinking about the reality of this stuff.
Well, I think we're all going to go down this road, right? More or less. I don't think, I'm not saying people are going to take advantage of us, but later in life. But there's going to be a period where we're going to enter a slow decline and be shadows of the people we were before. Like this is pretty much a universal story, aside from the way he was manipulated. But the point being, towards the end, was definitely not at the top of his game. And I think that's something that applies to everyone. It's a story that everybody can relate to, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of a best case scenario is like this decline, because some people don't make it into those golden years and stuff. So yeah, there is a decline. I mean, I think part of it is sort of the things that Stan valued and the things that he was looking for out of life probably had a role to play too. Like I feel like. And again, this is like more editorializing than I would do in the actual book. This is just sort of me, talking as me. But just that, I think he kind of, had some of the wrong value, like kind of put a lot of stock into, I don't know, like sort of flash and success, and surrounding himself with sort of wonderful friends, who are kind of witty at a party and things like that, and then maybe kept out some of like the real people, like some of the like real relationships that are maybe a little more difficult, maybe not as sort of fabulous or whatever, but are sort of like the real people who can really be there for you when you need them. And I think talking about Larry Lieber earlier, it's like he seemed to keep Larry at arm's length, like throughout their life. Like he kind of kept the distance from Larry Lieber for just basically his entire life, and Larry himself was kind of perplexed by it. And like, I mean, what a great resource, that would have added so much to Stan's quality of life if he had sort of kept his brother more in his life.
I also think that kind of behavior was instilled in him by his mother, because she, as depicted in the book, she doted on Stan. Everything Stan did was wonderful. And then when Larry entered the picture, she's like, "Don't touch that. That's Stan's. Like, get away from that. It's your brother's." So I think maybe some of the way he behaved towards his brother was planted by his mom, more or less.
Yeah, and I mean, there was something going on there, and yeah, again, hearing Larry's accounts of these things, like Larry was pretty perplexed by it, and some of that dysfunction in his sort of childhood, and like in his relationship with his mother and things like that. You can see how that can play itself out in adulthood, and in his relationships, and and maybe even like in his marriage too.
Right. Infinitely complex character, to say the least. Yeah. I love the sequence where it's around the time where Jack departed Marvel and went to DC and did the New Gods, and Stan gets to see the Funky Flashman character, and Stan's like, "I didn't know that Jack could be so mean." It's like, well, what did you expect? Right? That sequence is great, because I'm guessing, not only by the way you rendered it, but as a human being, that Stan probably was actually hurt by that.
It really did affect Stan, and it was shots fired for sure,
right?
And yet, like, and accounts. I mean, Mark Evanier talks about this stuff, but like that, like Jack was maybe even a little bit shocked at like how much, like he didn't start out intending to just completely lambaste Stan, but it and again, like Kirby was a creator who created from the gut, and just kind of like his pencil did the walking or whatever, and it just came out as this like and yeah, like when I first read the Funky Flashman story, like I didn't realize just how like how on target or whatever it was, because it was kind of like, oh well, this Funky Flashman guy, he doesn't look that much like, but because I was thinking of like the Stan I knew, like the 80s Stan with like the mustache and the sunglasses, Funky Flashman was kind of, it's a perfect like dead on rendering of like this like transitional period of Stan where he kind of was sporting a goatee and kind of had the toupee, like and it looked kind of very scholarly and stuff, but before becoming sort of like the like aviator shades and Burt Reynolds mustache.
Well, Jack was kind of easily manipulated by his anchor too, because if you remember that series of interviews that Jack and Roz did for the Comics Journal, where Roz seemed to poke him and like, "Yeah, Jack, you remember you created Black Panther, and Jack would be
Yeah.
like, yeah, I did. I created Black Panther. And Roz would be like, well, yeah, you also created, Nick Fury. That's your character. And Sam would be like, yeah, she's right. That's my character. And so, like, we see this where these larger than life heroes that we have usually have someone in their corner that wants them to succeed and may push and nudge them in directions that may or may not be actually true. But I that's what I got from a lot of this with Joan. While her commentary was positive, like, Stan, just do it the way you want to do it. You're fine. You're a good writer. Just do it. Where Roz was kind of manipulating Jack a little bit. Did you ever get that feeling from those interviews?
I mean, I think it's like Jack was just, very easygoing and kind of, he in interviews and stuff, he didn't really want to ruffle any feathers, and he was kind of like, and he was sort of an improv guy. He was kind of like a yes and kind of guy. So if the interviewer's like, oh yeah, and this, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. Where Roz was kind of like, yeah, keeping him on task and
right.
like, reminding him to be angry about some of this stuff. I mean, it was, like there's the quote of Roz saying, he may be the king, but I'm the queen.
Right.
Jack had his own mother issues too. So,
right.
he definitely, I mean, he worshipped his mother and like really put her on a pedestal, and there is a tendency to transfer some of that stuff into, your marriage or your family life or whatever.
Oh, we see that at Jack's funeral that Roz was hoping that Stan would be available to come up and if not say a few words, at least Roz wanted to. She said she wanted to hug him, just because it's what everything's fine, and it's what it's probably what Jack would have wanted, and I you can obviously, I mean, from what I understand, people can hold grudges, and there are as you get older, obviously you realize a lot of that is just the time wasted, and it was silly, but yeah, it's I definitely remember the interviews you're referring to, Vince. It was, and and there are times where, depending on how, like I can't imagine how it is to create a book like this where you're displaying what you've read, but I mean, just as a fan, and like if I read that Claremont and Byrne didn't get along while they were creating the X-Men or something, it's like it doesn't ruin the stories, obviously, because they're made and printed and you already read them, but you do still, part of me at least, I'm like, I not that maybe they were the best of friends, but I'm like, it bums me out knowing that people who could create something like this just either couldn't see eye to eye, or just it was for the sake of just the product, and there are real people behind everything that's being made, but you still, in my head, I just I kind of just want the whole kumbaya moment and everybody just kind of like get along, because these are good things, and they entertain people and make them happy, but obviously these are real people and personalities, and get in the way, and then of course, but when you have somebody like Stan, who obviously as time went on, and as Tom points out in the book, he does tend to correct people when they say, oh, you created Captain America, and he's like, no, that was Jack and Joe, or he'll mention how he would try to elaborate on what his involvement was and what the Marvel method was, and what a creator or co-creator is. And I definitely, you see an interview with Howard Stern, he's talking about, Stephen King writes a book and it's all him. And obviously that's apples and oranges, because you're a novelist, you're just one person writing. You're making a comic book, you've got maybe up to half a dozen people working on it. So you can't, it's easy for Stan to say, I came up with a name, so therefore I created the character. But you ain't got shit if you don't have the visuals to go with it in this medium. So it's very difficult for me to kind of stand behind it, no matter how great I want to praise Stan or just thank him for everything he's done. There are times where he'll say something later on, and I I cringe a little bit because it's just like that's not. I kind of know what you mean, but you're just not saying it right, and it doesn't ruin the moment, but it reminds me that people are human.
Yeah, and that's Stan kind of conditioned us to learn that that like even heroes are have their faults and things.
Mm-hmm.
And those like his like the most sort of like egregious things that he's said about the creation of these things and what his role is versus the roles of other people really comes about when it starts being like the subject of litigation, or even just the foundation of what like the company's case for ownership of these things rests in them being created by a salaried employee who
Right,
was
exactly,
in the
yeah.
office, so that like it is like that's when like the real shitty stuff kind of really happens, and then once he's committed to that storyline, he's kind of cornered, because if he were to sort of come out and contradict it, it's kind of like it's kind of a serious thing to contradict something that you gave testimony on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead.
I'm sure Stan at some point was instructed not to embark in conversations where the truth was vague.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure it was like, oh yeah, Simon and Kirby created Captain America, because that was at the time that was a truism. Everybody knew that to be true. Stan wasn't even in the picture then, right? So yeah, why not let that fly? But when the subject comes to the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer and all those characters, that's when Stan was like, well, yeah, this was created by, I directed these artists what to do. I created these characters and in tandem with a person that, created the images. So, because Tom's exactly right. When you're talking potentially billions of dollars, you got to watch what you say.
Yes. And the thing, and this is me editorializing, but whenever the Jack Stan stuff comes up, or there's a biography or a piece or a book done about any of them, or the era, I'm always mindful, and Tom, you did a nice job, I think, of capturing this in the beginning of the book, is, and the older we get and the more generations go by, this can be harder and harder for people to conceptualize, but they were children of the Great Depression. And, we're old enough to have known people personally that were people of Great Depression, whether it be our grandparents or, whatever. And that shaped that generation in a way that none of us can really quite appreciate in the way that we grew up. And I find that the thing that sometimes is lost in these debates is people are just wired differently, right? Like, and Vince, you've been fair with this over the years when we've talked about this, and I appreciate that. Jack's flaw, if as much as anything, was that he just was a lunch pail guy. Like, he valued showing up and doing the work to do the work to get the paycheck, because he had a sense of duty, right? Like, to provide for his family, and it was the way he could provide. And he, for a lot of his career, was just content doing that, right? Like, he didn't really get caught up in the, well, I got to own this IP and these, because he didn't really think about that. He just thought, I want to make a living, and that's how most people, I think, live their lives. Whereas Stan, who is not different than like a lot of startup entrepreneurs, right? It's like he always wanted more. He was ravenous for more wealth, for more fame, for more power. And it's just their mindsets and the way someone behaves in those, the way you're wired. It's portrayed sometimes like purely black and white, like one is an evil way to live, one is a good way to live. But that's not really fair, right? Like, I remember, this might not make sense at first, but just follow me. I was in line to get a badge for a tech, like a telecommunications industry conference, right? I was attending as an analyst, because we invested in the space. I'm in line to get my badge, right? And this was like during the internet bubble, so things were crazy. There was a couple behind me chit-chatting. They both worked for two different telecom companies. They were behind me waiting for their badge. on my BlackBerry, as I'm waiting to get my badge, I get an alert that one of the companies that's going to be at this thing gets acquired for a massive premium, right? So I'm like, oh, and I'm on the phone telling my firm about it. I'm like, oh, I see so and so is going to acquire tonight this morning. The guy behind me hears me. He's like, excuse me, well, what are you talking about? And I tell him, I say, oh, so and so is getting acquired this morning. He's like, oh man, he's like, I work for them, and I'm like, oh, and we started talking. Like, the guy had no clue what it meant, and it really meant like nothing financially for him. And he was just like, oh, I hope I get to keep my job. And I'm thinking, like, dude, not only do you get to keep your job, but like you have vested stock options that are worth like 10 times what they were worth 10 minutes ago. But like, to this guy, like this engineer who played a huge role in building this company, like, he never even conceptualized that he should get a piece of that. Like, it was just like, well, I'm an engineer. They pay me to code and build stuff, and that's just my job, right? Whereas, like, obviously his counterparts at that company just received life-changing financial news, and it like meant everything to them. That's why they were at the company. So it's like, it kind of reminds me of that. Like, Jack was just like I got to raise my family, I got to pay my bills, I want to have steady work, and I want to be proud of the work I do. Whereas Stan was like, I want to be rich. I want to give myself financial independence. I want to succeed beyond all measure of success. And it's just like that dichotomy was so evident to me whenever I read about the two of them. And like, I don't know that that's always fairly given portrayal in these things. And again, I'm not like excusing Stan's behavior for it, but I'm saying that's what it's like, the underlying sociology of what drove their behavior. Like, in my point being, like, I think Jack is as much to blame, quote unquote, for not getting his piece of the pie as anyone was for taking it from him, because he like many of these guys didn't even think to fight for it. Like, they didn't even really think about what it was worth.
Right. When he was aware that there was a pie, it was probably too late.
Yes, exactly. It was
Right.
too late by then, right?
Yeah. But I love that Stan was a cheerleader for comics, that he thought it was a great medium and everybody should be into it, and it's so wonderful. And he would preach at the pulpit of comics all the time because he saw it as an inroads to other more financially viable mediums like television and the movies. Once Stan got a taste that, hey, these stories can be told in other mediums that a lot of people consume, that's when Stan was like gung-ho. He was trying to get them, all the characters on the silver screen or on TV. He was a champion for that kind of stuff because the financial windfall was much greater than just paper.
Yeah.
Right?
And Tom, you do a great job too of it being pointed out. I think there's a couple scenes, but there's one where like, they're telling Stan, like, you're not a businessman, you're not a good businessman. And that was true. Like, Stan was a terrible businessman. He was an incredible brand ambassador. So when his business was to be a brand ambassador, he was awesome at that. And when his business, like in the last 25, 30 years of his life, was to get rich on his own brand, he couldn't fuck that up, right? Because it was just being himself was how he got rich. But as a businessman, he was fucking terrible, terrible, because he wasn't formally trained, right? He had really no training in it, and it was the nepotism, and then he just kind of like fell into that, and he just wasn't good at it. I mean, think about the fact that he was one of the first people on the planet to recognize that these characters could be in film and television bigger than they were in comics, and obviously we now know he was right. But it was his decision making that nearly made that a total non-starter, because he sold the rights to most of these characters away for literal pennies on the dollar, and that almost was inextricably ruinous to Marvel until they were able to build their way out of it, and the rest is history. So like, I just think that dichotomy fascinates me in a weird way, and I hate to make this comparison because you know how I feel about the guy I'm about to mention. Stan Lee and Donald Trump have a lot of similarities to me. I would opine that an objective analysis of Donald Trump the businessman is that he's a pretty terrible businessman. Sure. But he is legitimately, now he's not as nearly as wealthy as he's ever claimed to be, but he is certainly like generationally wealthy to the point where he never needs to worry about money. And much of that wealth was created by his brand, by his ability to market himself and his brand, much less so than his ability to be a good businessman. And I think that's a lot about Stan Lee too. I think that's really how he got rich and stayed rich.
What do you think about that, Tom?
I mean, the thing that impressed me in like my research and stuff was I always thought Stan just kind of stumbled into, you know, it just kind of like naturally segued into this sort of spokesperson role and things like that. But I mean, you know, looking at his letters and things like he really, that was like a very clear vision that he had, was this idea of, you know, putting him, becoming like, yeah, the brand ambassador, becoming the face of the company, making himself, you know, front and center. And there's arguments you could make, like you could say like, oh, you know, all that, you know, building himself as the brand, and then also making himself by extension the face of comics. You could say like, oh, well, that stuff wasn't as important in the scheme of things as it was for the company to, again, have this, you know, salaried employee who could, you know, every couple of years come out and testify that, yes, I am the sole creator of these. And then that would be sort of the incentive to keep him on the payroll for life. But his brand, like, it did have a value. And all of that crazy, you know, .com bubble stuff that he got involved in, it was based on his brand, and it wasn't like and it was based on sort of the way he'd, you know, sort of fixed that brand in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It, you know, it wasn't necessarily anything he did, you know, in you know, leading up to the 2000s. It really was this, you know, this sort of moment in time that he had. So yeah, like, making yourself into a brand is incredibly, like, it's a powerful thing. And sometimes it's, you know, like a Pandora's box or whatever. Like, it's incredibly powerful, but can be incredibly destructive in your life.
Yeah, it just kind of snowballed. And there was a lot of it that was just, unfortunately, beyond his control, and it's not a final chapter that most people want to see for a character like Stan, right? Because he, like it or not, he did bring so much value to our lives, and then unfortunately, we have the gift of longevity, at least longer than his. And we get to see it all come crashing down. It's not a fun thing to witness, right? Because you're right, he was a human being, warts and all, and we don't like to see that. Like, and the same with Jack, the greatest creator in the history of any medium, who should have been showered with dollar bills and rose petals, just kind of blinked out, right? The stuff towards the end was fine, but it was a shadow of the stuff that came before, and no one likes to see their heroes, you know, head down that final road, and yet we did, because, again, time's a bitch. They're lessons, I think, to learn and to live by, right?
Yeah, and as sort of, you know, fans of the arts and stuff, you know, we have this idea, like not even necessarily a stated idea, but maybe this subconscious idea that somehow, you know, art is going to be your salvation, and great art, and it's just like, it's a wonderful thing. It really is a nice thing to have in your life. It enriches your life, but you know, you're going to have to deal with all the same, you know, heartaches that anybody's going to do. It's not going to save you from, and so yeah, like, we have, you know, Jack Kirby dies in the 90s, and, you know, Stan Lee, you know, died a few years ago, but then it's also like, you know, like David Bowie died, Prince died, you know, it's like these are, you know, like, you know, it's kind of mind blowing. It's like everybody that was doing something cool in the 80s or whatever when we were kids, they're all, you know, like their time is you know, counting down. It's,
right.
Again, like, that's the thing of it being like just a meditation on mortality.
I think,
and by extension, you think of your own mortality. Obviously.
Right? Exactly. I think of just the reach that these people had in terms of, you know, the population of the planet. Like, David Bowie touched billions and billions of people, and yet was no more superhuman than any of us, right? Just to have that kind of to permeate the culture to the degree that these people did, Stan, Jack, Bowie, the list is long, and then they just go the way that we all go, right? They leave something behind greater than most of us, right? In that they've influenced an entire planet and generations, but they all end up in the same. We all end up at the same spot, right? It's very humbling to read stories like this, right? When you just see Jack again, a colossus among artists. Like there was nobody can. This is just again my personal opinion. Nobody can even touch Jack in terms of what he did, what he accomplished, his visual presence, the power in his work, his influence on everything, and then one day he's here, one day he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to get all morose and downbeat, but like that's just the way it is, and we need books like yours just to remind us that let's celebrate the good stuff about these people. Yes, here's what happened towards the end, but there's a lot of good in there, and let's maybe use this as a cautionary tale should anyone else find themselves in the same predicament. Maybe don't do it that way. I think it's one of the scenes that really resonated with me was Big John Buscema
hell yeah, tell me about it. Yeah.
on the Silver Surfer, and Jack's like, John, this is not cutting it. This is just bad, terrible stuff. And then time passes, and then we see an interaction between John and Stan, and John's like, hey, you didn't like that early Silver Surfer stuff. He's like, what, are you kidding me? It's like one of the best books we ever published. And it's like, pick a side, Stan. Where are you going with this?
But at least Tom included the opening to Bullpen Bulletins.
Maybe I should draw her bald-headed.
That's right.
Yep.
But yeah, and then and at least I got one panel of Gil Kane. And
very dapper.
And even Neil,
some nice. I like the way Tom draws Roy.
Yeah.
with the shorter hair, and I mean we get a full page of Neil Adams talking about unions and stuff.
Yeah.
I can't have that. I can't.
No, Tom, you do cover a lot of bases.
Yeah.
In terms of the satellites.
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. Was that it? How did it go through your head? How did you juggle all of this? Because there isn't, the reader has to obviously recognize, time is passing, and you sprinkle current events in, so this way people kind of know where we are on the timeline. But how difficult was it to keep this all linear so you could put it on the page and get it out? I mean, were things just all over the place for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, and maybe this is like obvious. Maybe this is the way everybody does, their thing. But like, I have my creative process, and for me, it's like I start with sort of like this out of focus, hazy view of everything, and I put together like bullet points where it's just like, okay, this, and this, and move those around and juggle them, and like it can be very basic stuff. And just juggling all of that, and then just in the act of like going through it over and over again, it just like slowly comes into focus. And like, maybe I'm focusing on like a certain area over here and getting that focused, and then moving over to another area, and just like continuing that process through the whole thing. So then when it's time to start writing and drawing like the actual pages, I'm doing that, and then maybe moving some stuff around, just it's like this kind of like living, document in progress that's just getting more and more refined and more in focus and more perfect. And then yes, sometimes you have to throw something out where it's like, okay, that, doesn't quite fit, or that's, redundant with something else. And so, but yeah, it's like, it's kind of like the end result. The book is smarter than me, because it's like the book, like it's hard to keep all this stuff in your head in one moment. But if you spread it out over a couple of years, and then you get this this very complete, very full picture that you've arrived at by degrees?
I think the visual approach to the two volumes is very smart in that the Jack book is more rugged and more earthy, and you use the crayon layer and you manipulate the visuals, and the pages are darker and somewhat weathered, and it's just a more streetwise depiction of the narrative. But in the Stan book, it's glamorized and Hollywood and clean and very the line is very not fixed width, but it's a very uncomplicated line. I thought, man, that is a neat way to approach it, in that you're basically visually describing the identities of these two men through the method by which you tell the story. It's pretty smart, Tom.
Yeah, it just made sense, like that. I mean, just the basic, overall thing of like wanting these books to be customized to these guys, and make them as different as possible. Like again, not like a redundant experience, but yeah, it just like I'd never drawn a comic like this. Like this was the whole style and approach was sort of tailor made to Stan, and it's like you need to be on a stage. It's like. I'm building this stage for Stan Lee, and there's snappy patter and jokes and witty kind of like one-upmanship with report and repartee, and it was just like this kind of this sort of streamlined, more sort of open, like airy style. Just it like just fits Stan to a T.
Yeah. I'm also very grateful for you including the Ditko corner box incident. I think that's one of the things. When I think Marvel, immediately I go to Jack, and then I go to Stan, and then I go to the trade dress. And the corner box is one of those monumental things that is just instantly, to me, speaks Marvel. And the fact that Ditko did those initially, that people need to know that, because you can't have Marvel without the corner boxes, right?
Between the corner box and the banner at the top,
the strip,
Marvel Comics group, that was my Marvel. That was when I was all in from that point on, and or at least that's when I got my foot in the door, and then that's where it took me. So it's still, every once in a while they try to bring it back, or they'll put it in a circle. They'll do things every once in a while, but nothing. I just
right.
If I close my eyes, or you say Marvel Comics to me, that's those covers. Are what I think about the trade dress exactly. And
it's just amazing how much of us. Because we all know that the nostalgia fuels the comic book industry, and pretty much most of the people still reading comics were reading them back then. Look at Eric Larson. For every issue, he does a Marvel-style trade dress. Like you cannot shake that Marvel graphic sensibility, and a lot of it is because of that brilliant corner box. Like it's so simple when you think about it, but that is like the Marvel thumbprint. Boom.
Yeah.
Losing
that and the old DC bullet. There's just certain things. It's like, why? Obviously times change and
right.
Tastes change, but still, it's just I also, thanks to this book, I don't think I was ever really aware that when the Avengers were created, that Jack just wanted his characters, Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, or Steve's guys. They don't need to be in my book, and I don't know why. It obviously makes sense if Jack did say that, then sure. But it never clicked to me that all these years, those first few issues of the Avengers, that they were all pretty much characters that Jack had a hand in, at least drawing the cover of, or doing a reference sketch or a model sheet that Don Heck or Bill Everett or somebody else would take off and run with it. It just, the Avengers were just Jack's characters, so that's why they were in the book. Makes sense.
Yeah, just thinking about that corner box, it's hard to imagine that somebody actually had to think of that. Like, it just feels like just so obvious and just something that's always there. But yeah, of course, like somebody had to come up with, and the fact that it was Steve Ditko, like that's awesome. And of the three of them, like Steve Ditko was the comics fan. Like Stan wasn't a comic, like he wasn't like super into comic books when he was a kid, and Jack, was kind of working in comics right there at the beginning. He wasn't like a kid who grew up with comics, but Ditko was. And so Ditko understood like going to the newsstand and like, hey, where's my favorite comic? Like he kind of had like the consumer view of things of like, hey, it would be really cool if you could like just at a glance be able to spot your favorite comic.
Yeah, it was very smart.
Yep.
I had a question on the tip of my tongue, but you may just have answered it. So just say these books are just flying off the shelves. They're doing very well, which it's going to happen, right? So 10 Speed's like, Tom, we need another one. Who's the subject?
I was thinking that too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. Ditko is the one everybody's kind of like that, like the street.
I think that's expected.
Spoken,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a Ditko book would be interesting. I wonder, like, going from a Jack Kirby book to a Stan book is kind of an easier sell because it's like, I like the idea of highlighting somebody that's more obscure. Like, not to say that Ditko's obscure, but just in, sort of, just ask somebody on the street, going from Stan Lee to Steve Ditko, it's like, like more obscure. So like, I don't know who you would pick that would be, more or as like easy a sell as Stan. But yeah, Ditko would be a perfect companion piece to this. I have been like for a while, like kind of thinking about doing like an Otto Binder book, like again, like choosing, because like I think it would be really cool to choose somebody who is known to comics people, but like is not known like at all to but again, like that. So yeah, I don't really know like who you follow it up with, but Ditko is a natural one.
Right. I was hoping you would say Wally Wood, but
Wally Wood's great. I'm such a Wally Wood fan.
Right?
And,
yeah.
And man, like what an ending.
Right.
It's Wallywood is good. There's name a guy like you can name pretty much anybody, and like Bill Everett, like there's and it is like, again, this doing Stan's life and doing Jack's life, it's just so amazing. Like it's kind of like Once Upon a Time in America or something, where like you start off with somebody in like the 30s or the 40s or something, and then you dissolve to somebody in the 80s. Like it's just so like just seeing somebody live through the 20th century and being able to like see that just sitting there reading a book, just it blows my mind. Like it just like when Stan started doing all that like early .com stuff, just like hearing Stan Lee talk about the internet just felt so weird, because it's like you're not supposed to know about that. Like you're supposed to talk about things being sort of swinging and hey pussycat, and like you're supposed to be like Austin Powers or something. Like you're not supposed to be talking about the internet.
The man, if anything, was forward thinking. I'll give him that. But you have another book that recently came out that I need to talk to you about. It came out of Image Comics. It's called Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, starring Adam Starr and the Solar Legion. And what this is when Jack was 22, he did a trio of stories for the first 3 issues of Crash Comics. And what Tom has done he's done the impossible. in my mind, because he actually made Jack Kirby better. Because and if you go to our website, 11o'clockcomics.com, click on the link for this episode, you will see a side-by-side comparison of one of Jack's original pages for the Adam Starr stuff and Tom's, quote, remixed. But remixed means you redrew all this stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, I closer to re-inked.
Okay.
But yeah, I kind of took Jack's panels and I just kind of moved them around, expanded some, shrunk some, and moved them like where I wanted them to be, where I thought would make like a more natural, more enjoyable reading experience, and then yeah, just go in there and like redraw them. Yeah.
Well, I think it was, like I said, an impossible task. How does one make Jack Kirby better? But you've done it, because the coloring employed on the original stories is absolutely crazy. It's impressionistic. It's all over the place. It's unpredictable. It's weird. It's just plain weird. So your decision to present it in a monochromatic way, I think, lends amazing clarity to the stories. And like we said, you went in and just re-inked or reworked Jack's marks. But in doing so, I think you slightly tightened it up a bit. You made the visuals more, you opened up the story by enlarging some panels and just placing them in a more organic way, a more reader-friendly way. Because I think the Jack's version, I don't even know if I want to say this, but it's kind of cramped and a little tight. But the way you opened it up, it just makes the reading experience so much better. And I messaged Tom on Instagram, and I was like, Tom, there's one of the things that always bugged me about these stories is there's one sequence. It's this Arthak hidden base sequence where Jack actually went backwards in the narrative. At the bottom of the page, it's actually half the page, he has an L-shaped panel, but he directs the reader to the left at the end of that panel, which is just strange and odd and not the way we read. We read right to left, right? Or sorry, left to right. But Jack pushed the reader to the left at the end of this page. I'm like, wait a minute. That always felt clunky and just plain weird to me. What Tom did, genius that he is, he flipped the sequence. Not just that panel, those two panels, but a couple panels before it too, where it reads so much better now. And you're actually reading the way we were taught to read, left to right. And I had to tell him, I said, Tom, I didn't think it was possible, but you improved on the King. You made him better.
Thanks, Vince. You can maybe improve on like 22-year-old Kirby, but once he's really cooking, then it's a different story. But well, yeah, I mean, he was like, this was one of his first comics. So he had done like a ton of comic strips prior to this, and he was just an amazing draftsman.
Yeah,
just from so early, from day one, and a really great writer too. And so he had all that going, but like just amazing writer, amazing artist. He just hadn't quite cracked the code of comic books yet. So he's just like the panel placement and things like that, which he would very quickly learn and figure out and master and reinvent. He just hadn't figured. So they're kind of arbitrarily stacked and stuff. And yeah, like when you sit down and read, those original stories, they have a ton of charm. They're quaint, they're fun, but just as like comics reading experience, your eye is zigzagging all over. Some of the panels are like super small, and it just it doesn't fulfill its potential, Exactly. And I was looking at this and I was like, this is an amazing story. Like if you just take each individual panel on its own merits, and the writing is incredible. And this is Jack writing it wasn't served by the format. So I thought, man, if you just kind of take this thing and do a little bit of this and that, you have a Kirby classic. Like now it's something you could put next to like his greatest work, where before it was just kind of like a fun, interesting historical oddity.
I totally agree with you. Without your hands, I think it's a footnote. It's a great footnote, and it's wonderful to look at, and it's Jack, so there's no bad, right? But I see this book, your version of the Star Warriors, as before you came into the picture, it was a grimy windshield with all speckles. You can't really see through it. You came along with the Windex, my friend, and you squeegeed that sucker into this beautiful thing that we have today. And you're right, it's awesome. I was reading it and I was like, holy! You can see future Jack in these pages. That the hairy worm thing, that's Mordecacus from Commandy. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't have the cellular structure of it, but you look at it and it's just all the hairy tendrils coming out of it. It makes me think Mordecacus. And it's like, Jack was on the fire of creation within Jack is unlike anyone before or since. Like, this guy was just, I think he has alien DNA, to be honest, but we won't go there. And
I think Roz thought that too. Like, she had said things about like, when are the UFOs going to come and take you away?
Well, I mean, you look at Jack was intensely fascinated by the face on Mars. Who, aside from Eric von Daniken back in the day, even knew about that thing? And Jack had inserted it into his stories. Like, what? Where are you from, Kurtzberg? And I want to start eating the same stuff you do, because Jack was on it like from the very beginning. But yes, so thank you for doing this. You've made this what was, I think, a very quaint and interesting story. You've elevated it to the point where it should be, alongside Jack's, not most loved stuff, but up there with the things you should really read if you're a Kirby fan.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, it's kind of part of the canon now, and the thing, it really came out in the research for the I Am Stan book that kind of made me want to do this, because I was looking at everything Stan either oversaw or wrote or whatever came through his editorial office. I tried to look at as much of it as possible, and I was looking at this Captain Daring story that it was Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, and it had like the dog cavalry from Apocalypse in it, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I didn't realize like Jack was doing that thing, like decades before New Gods and stuff. And it's a little more badass because they're riding around on the backs of these giant dogs that have like knives sticking out of the front of them. So it's really cool. So I was looking at that, and so then I was like, I got to find out more about this thing. And then I was reading about it, and that it was the theory is that this Captain Daring story was like a repurposed, unused Solar Legion story, like that it had started out that way, and then they Jack and Joe kind of turned it into something else. And so then that kind of, led me back to Solar Legion. And again, I had read Solar Legion a bunch of times in the past and just, didn't stand out to me, but like through that lens of like, okay, Jack's doing dog cavalries and stuff. And then looking at Solar Legion again, and it's like, wow, it's like, the child is the father to the man, or whatever. Like, 22-year-old Jack also has, 44-year-old and 50-year-old Jack inside of him. Like that, like it had, like amazing aliens and robots, and it also had, like in the writing and stuff, it had like the Jack Kirby kind of like poetry, right, and world weariness, and almost kind of like a nihilism too. Like Adam Starr doesn't take prisoners. Like he will nuke your planet.
Yes. So what was the behind the scenes story? Like, how did this end up at Image?
I mean, it was just kind of something I was working on the side, just for my own curiosity. Like, and exactly what you're talking about of like, man, what would this story look like if I just did this, and and wanting to see what that was. So I was just kind of toying with it. And as it was developing, I was like, you know what, this could actually be something like maybe. And I thought of Image, like, because I thought of that, just what, how, like, what Kirby fans they are, and like the role Kirby had to play in the early days of Image, and then thinking of like the Next Issue project and stuff that I had worked on a little bit with Eric Larson's. I thought, like, Image, if anybody's going to get this, if anybody's going to understand what I'm doing here, it's going to be Image and stuff. And so I emailed them, and then that same day they said, yeah, let's do it. And which is like, that's never happened to me with anybody. Like, getting a project approved the same day is just, I've never had it happen. I hope it happens again sometime.
Seriously, yeah. So you had it all completed when you sent it to them?
When I sent it to them, I was probably like halfway through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's essential reading, and it came completely out of the blue. Like, when it was solicited, I was like, "What is this? Where did this come from?" And I was so happy to see, Tom Scioli back at Image. I mean, doing the things he loves to do. It was just a really pleasant surprise, and I was, telling everybody at the shop, "You need to get this."
Very cool. Yeah. Coming back to Image was interesting too, and also, like, it does. I mean, even though it's a Jack Kirby work, it does kind of, it has a lot in common with Godland too. Like, it has a lot in common with like my stuff too.
Right. Yeah. So aside from the Stan book and the Adam Starr stuff, like, do you have time to read comics?
Oh, sure.
What's been floating?
Especially now, yeah.
What's been floating your boat?
Well, I've been doing like I have a YouTube channel, and I've been reviewing different comics on it and stuff. And so, and again, it was part of it is kind of just a way to give me an excuse to read more comics than I do, and so I've been reading my way through all the New Gods stuff, and all the ancillary series to that, and I've been reading my way through all the Thor stuff, starting with that first Thor appearance and Journey into Mystery and stuff. So I've been reading a lot of that.
Micronauts?
Yeah, Micronauts. Yeah, I'm reading my way through the Micronauts. So, like, that's been like my main stuff. And then, yeah, again, I'm always making trips to the comic store, and I always, come back with like way more stuff that I could read. And if I just read like a fraction of it, then I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I think this was something, it was like a recommendation on Cartoonist Kayfabe or something, but it was the Galassi Terminator mini-series. So I just picked that up, and I'm working my way through that, and that's pretty sweet.
I love Paul's stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big Galassi fan too. I mean, especially like the Master of Kung Fu.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Galassi on newsprint is just amazing. He
has that beautiful chiaroscuro style that lends itself so well to newsprint. Real heavy blacks. Yeah, love it. Yep. Well, I specifically asked you that question because I wanted you to tell them where they can go on YouTube to see you.
Okay, yeah, it's the Total Recall show.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sort of pop culture, a lot of like movie criticism and that kind of stuff, but then also peppered in there are some, straight on comic book reviews and commentary.
It's a neat potpourri. You never know what you're going to get, which I appreciate. I like that. I mean,
yeah, that kind of fits my personality.
Right.
It's kind of like, what am I in the mood to talk about? So I've also been doing like going through like just first issues or first appearances of like random stuff. So, Golden Age Hawkman and stuff like that. And again, some of this stuff I've never read before. Like, I never read the first appearance of Hawkman before, so it's kind of cool, like, checking this stuff out.
It's amazing how much we've consumed, but there's always things out there that'll shock and surprise us. I forget what book it was, but I was going through, a stack, and a book by Russ Heath came up, and I was like, I forgot what a monster Russ Heath was or is. He's still alive, right?
I think so. I love Russ Heath as well. Like oh my God. Like, and there's some people like that, and Kirby's definitely one of them. There's like some people where their name on something is just a guarantee of quality.
Right.
Like you can't go wrong with the Russ Heath. And so he has that Son of Satan issue that he did that's just incredible. And then whenever he shows up in like a Sergeant Rock or some kind of random war story, and the great G.I. Joe issue, like I think he did like 2 G.I. Joe issues, but there's like an early one that he did that's just exquisite, and
right.
I liked his adaptation of the Hugo Danner. What's that? The sort of like the inspiration for Superman.
Ooh, I haven't
the name of it.
I haven't seen
that.
That
pulp. There's like that pulp character. The name's escaping me.
Doc Savage?
Not Doc Savage. It was that. And what was?
Now you're going to send me on a hunt.
I know. He passed away in 2018, by the way.
Oh,
okay.
Damn.
Okay.
But I remember what it was. I was going through the Erie archives because I wanted to check a fact on Richard Corbin. And as I'm thumbing through the volumes, searching for the Corbin story, Russ Heath did a good amount of work for Warren Comics. And because it was non-code, he could get away with a lot more than, the 4-color stuff. And whenever, and you saw some of it later on in the DC when I think there was a Russ Heath Shadow of the Bat story where he really went in hard on Catwoman, if you know what I mean. But the Warren stuff, the ladies, Russ Heath's ladies are gorgeous. And like I said, it was Warren, so he got to show a little bit more skin than in the 4-color stuff. And it was like, oh man, that's when it just hit me in the back of the head. Like, wow, why am I not investigating more Russ Heath stuff? Because the work is just amazing.
The one I was trying to think of, it was Philip Wiley's Gladiator.
Oh, okay.
He did like a comics adaptation of that. I forget who wrote it, but really nice stuff. Like later, this was something he did in the 90s.
Right. He's so much out there. What else have we been reading? Let's talk it up. Why not? I can tell you what I'm reading if you guys are just not going to say anything.
Well, I mean, you can do that. But there's one thing I wanted to ask Tom about.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah. Just 10 Speed. This is your second book with them, obviously, but I didn't really know them, at least in terms of as a graphic novel imprint, until your Kirby book. So, how did you hook up with them, and what's the experience been like? It sounds like, I mean, you obviously went back to the well. You've been working with them for 3+ years now. So I'm just curious, should we expect like a bigger push from them into the graphic novel world, do you think?
Yeah, and that's kind of like that's happening right now because when I started with them, I think they might have done 1 or 2 graphic novels. Like they've done, I don't think I was the first graphic novel that they did. But they've been around for a long time. It's just kind of, the graphic novel was relatively recent. But now they've like created an entire like graphic novel wing. So they're, going full bore into it. So yeah, there's going to be more stuff from them.
Okay, excellent.
Neat. Hopefully.
So now, Vince, you can speak on what you're reading.
Well, you're going to groan when I say
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to groan, but I really don't care because I think these comics are amazing. I got caught up on Wolverine. Tom, are you reading Wolverine?
I'm not. I'm not. I heard there's like Predator versus Wolverine or something.
Oh yeah, I'm not messing with that. No. This series is written by Benjamin Percy, but it's illustrated by Juan Jose Rip. crazy intense illustration, just hyper detailed lines all over the place. I don't know how he completes an issue in a month, but he must be quick. It is just ridiculously. It's like whenever you take a hit of something and it gives you amazing clarity and you see things that aren't there in the waking world, like that's what looking at Rip to me, I can compare it to. It's just amazingly dense. But the story, like I like Wolverine, but for me to read a Wolverine monthly, it's got to be both extremely well written and illustrated and a little bit on the weird side. Like I like my Wolverine weird, and that's what this is. Jason isn't a fan because they're trying to demonize the Beast. They're slowly trying to turn him to the Dark Beast from Age of Apocalypse. And what's going on here, I'm not going to recount the whole thing. I just basically want to talk about the most recent issue, which is issue 37. But in terms of story, the Beast killed Logan, cut his head off. And because of Logan's healing factor, that's really not an issue. He's going to revive. And when he does revive, the Beast fits him with this collar that brings out the more animalistic side of Wolverine, and he just points him in the direction of all these anti-mutant entities. He's basically an assassin. He's going around killing people in their sleep. So because Beast has an agenda, you know. So the Beast clones himself into a group of blue lackeys, basically, in order to increase his brain power. But they're subservient, or at least he thinks they are. And they eventually make the bad decision to turn on him, and they're slaughtered. But he also clones Wolverine and creates the Weapons of X, where they're basically his strike force. So things go south, and the jig is up. The Beast escapes, but most of the Wolverine clones are killed, except for three. Three of them get away. So Wolverine embarks on a course of action to eliminate the alternate versions of himself. Makes sense, right? This is where this was a holy shit moment in issue 37. One of them, as you would expect, heads up to Canada because they are clones of him. So they do have the somewhat, they're not as articulate and their brains are not as highly advanced as Logan's. They're somewhere in the genetic process where they've developed, but they don't have all of Wolverine's brain power. But they do retain aspects of his personality. Like one of them is very animalistic. One of them is extremely compassionate, and so on. But so one of them, as you would expect, goes to Canada, right? Ends up at the Howlett estate. But it does the unthinkable. It consumes human flesh. Now, what happens when you consume human flesh in Canada?
Wendigo.
The clone turns into a Wolverine Wendigo.
That's insane.
It's a Wendigo with Wolverine's claws. Like, shut up. How inventive is that? That made my freaking day. I call it the Wolverine-digo. That's TM me. And the Wolverine-digo rips Logan in half in graphic detail over its head, pulls Wolverine apart, and who saves the day? But Bruce Banner as the Hulk. Because if you're reading the new Hulk book, Banner's on a quest to squash out the monsters as well. That's what the Wendigo is. So it just makes logical sense that Banner would be there. So Banner helps him. Then there's another clone that heads to Japan and gets in the clutches of this ghost sect that they use the clone's blood to bestow this warped semblance of extended life. I don't know. Maybe Wolverine's healing power is somehow transferred in his blood. But this one is compassionate, where the other one was bestial. And the last one, where do you think the last one ends up, Jason? Not a reach. It's Wolverine. What was one of the high points in the Wolverine canon from the
Madripoor.
past? Yes. Yes. The last one heads on over to Madripoor,
Yes.
and he's the muscle at the Lucky Tiger Casino. There's a Solemn Returns. There's a Muramasa blade in it. Like, this is playing to my heartstrings. And it's just, I think Percy is awesome on this book. It's just so much fun. I really can't get enough of it.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm going to like this issue. I mean, it's because it's the postscript of the Beast stuff, so.
It is.
Yeah.
But, spoiler, Beast gets away. So
Of course.
yeah, I mean, he created an international incident. He extricated the point from Krakoa, so now it's this giant skull-headed kaiju that's ripping apart submarines. So like the military's not pleased with the Beast. The government's not. So now the Beast is persona non grata. They know that he was responsible for this. So this is just another couple steps down that road for the Beast to become a true villain. And I think this is how I like to see him. I know you don't agree, but I think we're going to have nothing but villain Beast in our future, if this series is any indication. I mean, how are you redeemed from this? You killed.
Well, I mean, I agree with your first part. I disagree with your second. Meaning, I do think the plan for a while is to make Beast a villain. But in terms of how do you redeem him, I mean, Magneto, Apocalypse, these are all benevolent parts of the current Marvel X-Men, right? And they're the ultimate. So,
but you need
if they wanted Beast to become benevolent again, they could do it. But I don't know that that's the plan anytime soon.
Right, which is what I'm saying. But
yeah.
I think you need an architect on the level of my God, am I getting old?
Hickman
to pull it off. Right?
Yeah.
You need somebody that can make a logical, well thought out explanation as to why Apocalypse is not a bastard anymore. I mean, it just makes sense, right?
For sure.
Yeah, and there's incidents in the series with Black Tom that are hysterical. Like, this is a really good series. If you don't read the mutant books, you really don't need to know very much other than Wolverine, healing factor. Beast, one time a hero, not so much anymore. It's all you need to know. These go down like candy. I love this series. If they publish an omnibus of this, my finger's going to be on the buy button day one.
With cheap graphic novels.
That's right. It's just so good. And it's a visual smorgasbord. You can look at all these panels and be like, my God, how does this guy do it? Like, everything is so beautifully rendered and just massively intricate. I love this book. But then, so I will now pull my chair away from the table because Jace don't want to hear about Nasty Beast anymore.
I will say, before we move on, you did mention how you were looking up some Richard Corbin stuff in Erie. And that reminded me that the current Humble Bundle, for those of you that are that are not paying close attention, is an Erie Comics Humble Bundle. And it is all 27 volumes of the Erie archives, plus Erie Presents Hunter, plus Erie Presents El Cid. To get all of that would be $18 or more.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much I spent for those.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
The Humble Bundle is awesome. It almost feels like you're stealing, but you're not. It's all fair and equitable. And for $18, you're literally, if you end up only reading one of these archives 5 years from now, it was worth it. So do it now, get it so you have it, and you won't be sorry.
Well, the Hunter and the El Cid stuff is not a bonus because they appear within the archives anyway. So
why would they separate them out, do you think?
Those are just collections because the Hunter stuff is.
If you just want the 3-item bundle.
Yeah, the Hunter.
Oh, got it.
Hunter was non-sequential. It didn't appear in consecutive issues of Erie. Maybe it jumped one or two. Yes, it did appear in consecutive issues, but the majority of the Hunter story jumps around. So it's like maybe issue 48, 52, 53, 61. You know what I mean? So yeah, they collected them all in one volume, which is easy to read. You don't have to be, opening other volumes. I get it. But yes, a bonus, but not really. You get them with the archives as it is. Plus, you get Richard Corbin and Bruce Jones's Time Raft stories, which are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a trilogy and it's amazing. But I'm gonna shut up now.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Not you shutting up the area.
Well, either way.
Either way, indeed.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. What else? Let's read. Talk about something we can all collaborate on.
Oh,
You have anything in there?
that we all can collaborate on. Jeez. I don't know that we do. Do we? I don't
think so.
I don't think so.
David read Uncanny Spider-Man #1, but I don't see it on your list.
I did read it last week. I had read it. Yeah.
Tom, have you read that?
No, I haven't.
It's Kurt Wagner in a spider suit.
I heard you guys talking about it.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
On a previous episode, and yes, I only have like my imagined visual of what that looked of, like Spider-Man with a tail and pointy ears and
That's it, yeah.
2 toes.
So much fun. Yeah. I don't know. I may be turning the corner on Marvel. I don't know. We'll see how it works.
I think you definitely
It's
are.
all
You bring them up every
cyclical,
week.
baby.
It's
that time of
definitely
year.
between the symbiotes and
well,
you're back in it.
You're talking no-brainers, the symbiotes. That's a massive no-brainer.
Wolverine's weekly team up. He's got the Hulk this week. Wendigo's he's got Ghost Rider last week. It's great.
Yeah.
Making a good case for it. I want to check it out.
Nice. Yeah, they're just plain. They're it's just fun comics. There's no heavy lifting required. They're very well written. In terms of illustration, I think Marvel is going back up the bell curve where previously I think they were sliding down a little bit as a company, not as individually on individual books. But it seems like seasonal, right? Things come and they go, and this is the time for me anyway when Marvel seems to be doing good stuff. Yeah.
There you go.
There we go.
I've been rereading some things in preparation of catching up on finishing them. I reread the first 4 volumes of Headlopper because I had been falling way behind on Headlopper. Just kept buying it and hadn't read it in years. We've covered that many times. It's quite good. Don't need to get into it too much, but it's been fun to get back into the world of Andrew MacLean. And I just reread the first 3 volumes and plan to reread the whole thing of 20th Century Boys, which of course is, and I think not just my own, but many people consider one of the better modern manga of all time, Naoki Urasawa. But the new thing that I read that I definitely wanted to shout out is Sea Serpent's Heir, Book 2, Black Wave. Probably 2-ish years ago, I talked about Sea Serpent's Heir, Book 1. This is Volume 2 of a 3-volume series, trilogy. It's written by Marguerite Scott with art by Pablo Tunica. And much like the first volume, I adored this. Couldn't wait to get the second volume. Can't wait for the third to come out. This is a fantasy adventure comic set in a world of magic and high seas piracy. The lead character, for those that don't remember the first volume discussion, I don't blame you if you don't, is a young woman named Ayala. Her mother is one of the most renowned pirates in this world. Ayala is imbued with the spirit of this mystical, all-powerful dragon, kind of like a Fang Fang Foom level dragon, and she's imbued with that spirit. And in the course of the first volume, because of some dastardly doings against her mom and her aunts and her family and the like, she manifests the sea serpent and lays waste to their enemies in like a really dramatic fashion, to the point where you realize like this is kind of a pact with the devil. Like letting loose the serpent is not necessarily a good thing, and in fact, there's a prophecy with which suggests that she, via her being imbued with the sea serpent, is going to end up destroying the world, and so using her power is very, very fraught with risk, in that it could end the world. This picks up right where that first volume left off, with the aftermath of her using the power and what that means, and also trying to come to terms with why she's imbued with the spirit of this dragon, what it means, can she extricate herself from it. All the while, she is seeking revenge against her former good friend who betrayed her and her family, that led to all of that happening. We learn much more about the chief antagonist, or this group, the Church of the First Light, and they profess to be on the side of good, again trying to protect the world from evil. But of course, that's not really what's going on. And she and her crew of pirates slowly but surely try and piece together where she fits into this equation, and how to combat them, and how inextricably linked they may be. It's just wonderful. It's if you're a fan of fantasy comics, then you'll certainly enjoy this. It's magic and fantasy and pirates, all swashbuckling, all rolled into one. And just like with the first volume, to me, a major draw here is Tunika's art. Tunika is very much in the David Rabin, Paul Pope school. Big, exaggerated eyes, expressive eyes, just wildly creative cartooning. Love the color play in this book. The color palette's just wonderful. And I just think it's an absolute home run. One word about this: these books are digest size. They're they're a bit smaller than a comic. They're trade paperback form. They're published through Image Skybound. They're Comet imprint, which is their all ages imprint. And they're wonderful, and I can't wait for the third volume, which I assume will be coming out in 2025-ish, I guess. And, we are all huge fans of Tilly Walden, yes, and we all think she is one of the best around these days, and she loves this book. That's actually what made me pick up the first volume. She gave it a big shout-out on the socials about how much she adored the book, and so if it's good enough for Tilly, it's damn sure good enough for me.
Wow, peer pressure. It does work. It works. Before David goes, I have a question for Tom.
Yeah.
You coming to New York Comic Con?
I'm not. That sounds like a lot of fun, but no, I'm not. Our buddy Dave Wachter is going.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a big whole hug reserved for me. So I'm looking forward to that. It's been a while since we were with Dave.
Yeah, he reminded me that the last time he attended New York Comic Con was when he tabled with us at the Bullpen Bulletins booth.
Oh, man.
Wait, what? That's the last time that Wachter was at New York Comic Con?
When he was at Podcast Alley, and then he and Pat Loikas spent the night at my house before I took him to the airport on Monday.
Holy shit.
That's a long time.
And
you know
like 2006 or 7, yeah.
Yeah. You know who was sitting next to us at that strip of booths?
Gene Colan.
Gene Colan.
Yep. Because I have
really?
Podcast Alley? I have a Howard, because he was there with Heroes Initiative. So, so I have a Howard the Duck in my sketchbook.
Yeah, turn to your right. Oh, it's Gene Colan. Life is great.
Wait a second. So I'm confused. So I thought... So EOC didn't exist for the first New York Comic Con?
No, that's when Marty and I got fired at by Frank Miller with the Sharpies.
Yeah, I didn't go the very first year. Went the second year, like 06. And then, but yeah, because
it's weird, because I remember vividly, and I think we talked about it when Stegman was on, how Stegman said, "Oh yeah, I like your podcast," and I was baffled that a creator actually listened to our podcast, and I thought in my mind, see, Mind Plays Tricks, that was the first New York Comic Con. But
no,
that Mandela effect.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes. Huh. Well, I'll carry a picture of Tom around, just so you could be there in spirit.
Nice. We could FaceTime.
Yeah,
and you could point your
walking
phone
down the house.
Would you like to talk to Tom? Wait a minute. Ding, 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 ding.
Mm-hmm. Are any of you gentlemen fans of any of the things I mentioned? Have any of you read 20th Century Boys?
Yeah,
I have. Yeah. I became a fan of Kurosawa like after watching the Manben TV series that he does. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
He like interviews other manga cartoonists and kind of he sets up these like robot cameras or whatever to just kind of like film the artist in their studio like over the week, and then the two of them together kind of like look over the footage and make comments and ask each other questions. It's a great series. Like
Nice.
you can find it on YouTube, but it's amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
The 20th Century Boy. I haven't read that yet because I wanted to, not that it was one or the other, but I have a couple of volumes of. I don't have a complete set of Pluto, and I wanted to finish Pluto before I moved on to something else, so I still haven't gotten around to 20th Century Boys.
Yeah, Pluto's amazing.
Yeah, that may be pricey, Dap. I think some of those are.
Yeah, I don't. I'm missing the last couple. I think I might have the first 3 or 4. There's only like 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think there's 8, 7. Right,
Yeah.
7 or 8. Yeah.
So I just got to see which ones.
8 volumes of Pluto. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very.
There's
good
no
stuff.
there's no large collection of it.
No, it's baffles.
No.
Yeah, right. It just does not
Okay.
make sense. Yeah, we should all get the eye tattooed from 20th century on our like foreheads. That'd be great.
On the foreheads. Perfect.
You lost me a forehead, but I was.
Yeah, I'm down with a tattoo, but yeah, the forehead might be a little iffy.
Yeah. I mean, Urasawa's an all-timer. I mean, obviously, he's a beast.
Oh, for sure.
So true.
There was a little bit of a 1-2 punch because this was from a couple weeks ago actually, but I still reading Tom Taylor's take on the Titans, alliteration for Stan, and you have Nicholas Scott on art and Annette Kwok on colors still. Third issue, we're dealing with the Church of Eternity / the Church of Blood, and Gar. I don't know what's up with Gar in this book. It's weird, but he and I didn't know, like, all my life reading Changeling or Beast Boy or whatever he was called at any given moment, he could turn into one animal, right? Like whether it's an elephant or a cheetah or a monkey or a cat, like it's an animal. Here he's like breaking into. He's going to be the infiltrator. He's going to get into the Church of Eternity so he can kind of open the window so Nightwing can get in. So he's flying. Gar is flying towards the church as a bat, and then he shapeshifts into a whole swarm of bees, and then he changes into ants. But they're all him. Like when did he get the ability to become a massive swarm?
It's kind of cool though.
It is, but and I'm not saying I wanted to see some big ass bumblebee or some giant ant, but I'm like, I didn't realize that this was now a power set. But okay, so he breaks into the church, disables the cameras, opens the windows tonight we can get in, so they're all stealth, and Gar's like, well, why don't, and this is another thing, like, I don't understand, like he's like, I think he's like walking around concussed. He asked Dick, like, why don't we just use a boom tube, and Dick is like, bro, we're trying to be stealth, like why would we use a boom tube if we're trying to get in here all on the down low? And
because it's cool.
It is cool, but it makes a lot of noise. It go boom, and so you're kind of giving away your whole element of surprise there.
I had a boom tube. I would use it all the time. Go to drugstore, boom tube.
Oh, well, yeah. That's why they know what you're there for.
That's right.
But Vincent Condon again. So you have these, you have the whole cult out there chanting "All for you." There's this big pool of blood down there. There's about to be a sacrifice on the altar, and so Nightwing and Changeling or Beast Boy come swooping down. He goes turning into a hawk to a gorilla, and he's beating up on the ringleader in the front. Nightwing saves the woman on the altar, and then a bunch of the acolytes dive into the pool and emerge all covered in blood. And now, of course, they're a little amped up. And now that this is happening, Nightwing calls the rest of the Titans. He's like, listen, we're past the stealth portion of the evening, and so the rest of the team can show up. And Wally's still raring to go. He's like, okay, let's do this. And they're all like, no, dude, you die in like 48 hours. Sometime within the next 48 hours, you're going to die. We don't want to put you in a situation where that may be the thing that kills you. And he says, well, you're all about to run into danger, putting your lives on the line. And I'm not going to sit here and stand by. So the Boom Tomb shows up, and everybody comes out, and all of a sudden here comes Tempest, or Garth, or Aqualad, whatever you want to call him this week. And he's like, he wants to know what his friends are doing attacking the church. And it turns out Brother Eternity was basically, they overtook the church from him, and they kind of like chained him up in the basement. And whether or not it's on the up and up, I don't think it is, and it kind of gives it away on the last page here. But Tempest is like, listen, like the church is good. These are my friends. I don't know what the hell was going on with the cultists, but as far as like, everything I know, Brother Eternity is telling me, and he's legit. And he's like, so you guys can go back to the tower. I'm gonna stay here. And turns out that Wally, when he was zipping around the church, he spotted something that didn't seem quite right. So he brings it back to Titan's Tower while the whole fight's going on, and then gets back to finish the fight with the team. Brother Eternity realizes that the item is missing, and he's going to send Garth back to Titan's Tower to go reclaim it. And how he's going, how he manipulates Garth into doing this is pretty freaky, and is on the last page of the issue. And I'll leave it there. But it's it's weird. I still just, again, Taylor's a competent writer. I dig in his Superman. I have no problem with work Tom does, but it's my hang up depending on how the Titans are portrayed, and I'm not really feeling this team still. It's the third issue, so I don't know how much longer. I kind of want to finish this arc to see where we go, but on the flip side, the slightly more nostalgic version of the OG Teen Titans, World's Finest Teen Titans by Wade and Lupacchino and Belair. The third issue of this miniseries, basically they go to Titans Con, and it's in Metropolis, and it's typical. Emanuela's art is this neat little mashup of the Dodsons and Yannick Paquette. It's just there's just something about the art that's just it. The women are extremely attractive. The men are good looking. I like the look, but there's, as is often the case, you think it's just going to be a typical comic convention or Titans convention, and it's not really the case. Now, all of the Titans save one are going to the convention. You've got Bumblebee, you've got Speedy, Wonder Girl, Aqualad, Kid Flash. The only person who's not going is Robin, because the Batman says you're not joining your friends. Actually, Bruce thanks Dick for not joining his friends, and the kid's like, yeah, you gave me an order. And Bruce is like, well, nonetheless. So you have he's just like, I need you can't. I don't want you at the convention because there's going to be cameras there. The more eyes on you, the more exposed you are. He's being Batman, and Robin, of course, isn't Batman, but he's also a member of this team, leader of this team, and he kind of doesn't want to leave him hanging. But Batman says, so that's what happens. But there are some things that go a little haywire. Speedy decides to play William Tell to some con attendees, and while he's doing that, Kid Flash swaps around some of the arrows in his quiver, and instead of a fireworks arrow, it's an oil slick arrow, and it like splashes everybody in the area, and it's basically just Wally being a prankster. Big Bad shows up, not that big, but bad guy shows up, wreaks havoc. The Titans are doing what they can do to kind of calm everybody down, take this guy out. That's when Robin shows up. Bumblebee is not having it because the dude who shows up is basically like claims he's in love with Bumblebee and you're going to be mine, and it's just he's really on the weird side. But when Robin shows up to take him out, Bumblebee steps in to knock him out. And there's someone behind the scenes in the shadows, literally in the shadows, who's creating his own Terror Titans and some of the adversaries that we've seen so far in this limited series. He's basically recruiting them or having them join his crew. So we'll see what happens as we reach the climax of this series and have the whole face off. But yeah, this is one of those like Vince is having fun with Wolverine and the X books. If Wade wants to just keep writing if they want to give Wade an imprint of World's Finest with a whole bunch of different characters, I'm here for it. It's not, like I said before, it's in this limbo in a good way of just like it's not really tied into whatever's going on with DC proper. It's not part of the dawn of DC. It's nothing Black Label. It's Wade writing stories, characters that many of us just grew up enjoying in a different setting. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I mean, both Titans books they're both good, different, and you can take whichever one. But yeah, I'm all about the World's Finest these days.
One of the things I don't believe I've ever read, and for the life of me, I don't know why no one has ever explored this. Why don't they link Buddy Baker to Gar? Like, why wouldn't you do a story where Animal Man somehow is linked to Changeling? It just makes sense to me, but I don't believe I've ever read anything with these two characters.
Because is Buddy a mutant? How did he I forgot.
The morphogenetic field. I don't know if he's a mutant per se, but I mean the red, like he controls everything in the red, and Gar can assume the form of animals, so you would think that these two characters would somehow be linked. Yeah,
no, well, I would a team up would definitely be interesting, but Gar's life was saved, and the chemicals, the what saved his life, gave him the ability to.
Sure, but that could easily be manipulated into they didn't give him the ability to change into an animal. They gave him the ability to access the morphogenetic field. You know what I mean?
You. Yeah.
So I think there's a story here.
There is,
but I can't, for the life of me, ever remember reading anything like that.
No, I think I mean 6 Degrees of Separation. I think the closest would be from 52 when Animal Man was like teaming up with Starfire.
Close enough.
But it's just Titans, but it's not like it's. But yeah, I could think of at least one Titan teaming up with Animal Man.
I want to see this story. I want to see
that would be cool.
Thomas.
Yeah.
What's next for you? You did a book on Kirby. You did a book on Stan. You made early Jack better. Like, what do you do now?
That's a great question, and if you have the answer, let me know. Because I mean, I'm always working on a million different things. It's just a matter of if it becomes a book or not. So, I mean, the thing I'm really leaning into right now that maybe will become something is this comic called Witchman that I'm working on. It's kind of like a golden age superhero kind of thing, like kind of horror hero, like like a Batman the Shadow or something, but he dresses up like a witch and
Ooh.
fights crime.
I like what I'm hearing. Are we gonna? You gonna do the more experimental risograph crayon layer stuff, or is this going to be more traditional, like in the vein of an actual Golden Age comic?
No, I mean, I'm not looking to, do like a Big Bang Comics, or like I'm not looking to, evoke like a particular look or mark making of Golden Age, but just that spirit. So it'll look like me, like it'll look like,
Awesome.
the same guy who drew, the Jack Kirby book, the Stan Lee book, American Barbarian, whatever.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. Get it done tonight so we can have it by the weekend.
Okay. I got 2 pages.
Oh, no. Well, you got some work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. All right. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Scioli before we bring this on home?
No, man, just keep up the great work. It's inspired stuff. I hope it's a huge hit.
Thanks.
So is it officially out, or did we get like early copies, or what's up with that?
No, it's out. It came out, I think it came out last week, and then Star Warriors came out this week. So no, it's pretty new. Like, it's out there, but it's pretty new.
Well, get out there, people, and get it. Amazon, your local comic shop, wherever they sell these things, make sure you get there and order I Am Stan, because I don't want to say it made me a convert, but I enjoyed it very much. Yeah. It was a well-balanced portrayal.
Yeah, I mean, Vince, if this is going to make you a Stan Lee fan, that's like the highest praise I can think of. Like, we'll have to put that on the back.
Yeah, no,
the book.
don't get carried away. But
it is.
yes.
It's $21.74 at cheapgraphicnovels.com.
You go to our how about that, David, the clear thinking, level headed one. Go to our sponsor and order it.
First and last time that'll be said.
There you go. All right, everybody. Remember, as the good sir just reminded us, this thing has been sponsored by cheapgraphicnovels.com. It's in the name. Omnibus, trade paperbacks, manga, very cheaply acquired. Go there and save. And remember, email comes in. Thank you for ordering. You reply, I would never heard about this if it wasn't for 11 O'Clock Comics. And they will say, hey, guess what? Free shipping next order, my good friend. You can't beat it. Also, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/11 O'Clock Comics. We have audio, lots of it. You get video, downloads of vintage fanzines, comic book pages, comic book covers. It's a veritable onslaught of 4-color goodness every damn day. Changes are in the works. We're going to be retooling it a bit very soon. We keep saying that, but it's going to happen. And you get to vote, or weigh in at least, on the book of the month. Plus, we have a dedicated Slack channel where everybody communes each and every day. It's a riot, Alice. In your travels, I revisited a book that is probably one of the most important things in comics I have ever read. In terms of the impact on me, how it shaped my perception of comics, how it influenced my buying habits. Long story short, it was recently published by Dark Horse. It is from Richard Corbin. Had Jack Kirby never lived, Richard Corbin would be my vote for the all-time greatest comic book artist. And it's called Den, Neverwhere. I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't think David or Jason has read it. And I don't want to taint their perception of it. But it is basically Richard Corbin utilizing the beauty of his favorite model, Karen Gilbertson, to the utmost potential. Karen was, I believe she may be still alive. Karen was a very buxom lass. And legend has it that she worked with Bruce Jones's wife And Bruce knew that Richard was looking for a model, so he brought her on over to Corbin's studio, and Corbin's jaw hit the floor. And he was very enamored with her. She appears in the Bruce Jones and Richard Corbin collaborate on a bunch of stuff. And Gilbertson is a fixture in just the Corbin depiction of female anatomy. Let's just say she was very voluptuous, childbearing hips, tomboy or Buster Brown blonde hair. She was gorgeous, and she appears in a lot of Corbin stuff. And Den is basically a nebbish, a skinny old four-eyed kid who finds a schematic in his deceased uncle's belongings, and he builds the schematic and is taken to another world. But when he lands in another world, he has the physical form of an Adonis with a giant pecker. And so basically it's Richard Corbin visualizing his love for the John Carter of Mars stuff, because it's basically the same premise, more or less. And Den's adventures on in this new world. And they're bawdy, and they're dirty, and they're amazing. Richard was a master of creature and creature design, and it's every page is an example of why I think Corbin was just a maestro of comics. And this is great that Dark Horse is republishing all this stuff, because they went away for a while, and now they're back. I remember first time I picked up an issue of Heavy Metal with a Den chapter, and I was just like, never the same. It just completely transformed everything. My tastes, my outlook on comics, just the things I would consume. I followed Richard Corbin ever since. And this, you have to have this volume. If you've never read Corbin, well, now's your chance to get in on the ground floor. They did Murky World first, which I don't understand. This should have been first, but whatever. It's a wonderfully produced, slick hardcover volume. It's 30-some bucks, but well worth every penny. Go get it. Richard Corbin's Den Neverwhere. There's going to be 4 Den volumes, and you're gonna need them all, because they're that good. And then you can buy Mutant World and Murky World and Werewolf and all the other stuff that I'm sure is coming down the pike from Dark Horse.
Nice little spot varnish on a dust jacket, but then the image you see inside the box on the jacket is in full size on the hardcover itself. It's a nice package. But yeah, you said you should have it. I have it right here next to me. I will be digging into it soon.
Right. When you read it, know that there's a character in the book called Ard. He's a skeevy little perv. That character was modeled after Bruce Jones.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. Yep.
Ah.
You get to see an albino ape dog creature with a pink dick. I mean, where else are you going to see that?
Man. Too true. Let's see. In your travels, yeah, I didn't get to read a whole lot this week. So I am just going to say I think I know how we might. I have ideas as to where Big Game by Miller and Larraz is going, because with each issue, it's like it can be kind of depressing seeing what happens to these heroes thanks to Wesley and his cohorts. But Big Game is just, it looks fantastic. Obviously, it's drawn by Pepe, but yeah, I'm having more fun with it than I think I should be, and I'm seeing characters revived and brought back, and just the story that Mark's telling with the characters that we've talked about this recently anyway, but just the characters he's had at Image and even when Icon started, and what they're doing now, and what their characters what the characters are doing now, and this whole big crisis event that's happening, and how things changed from the 80s to now. It's crazy, and it hurts that it's only a 5-issue series. And the last page of the 3rd issue definitely threw me for a loop. Kind of the cover of the 4th issue, when you turn the page, it's right there. So it kind of doesn't spoil it, but it definitely plays its hand a little bit. Although the cover of the 3rd issue, that image doesn't appear in the issue. So the covers can just be pinups for all I care. But as far as what's inside, it's a hell of a story. It's knocking me on my ass, and like I said, I think I know where we're going, but I will not be upset if that doesn't happen and it goes in a completely different direction. I'm sure I'm still going to be entertained because it's still going to look amazing. But yeah, in your travels, it's only 3 issues so far of a 5-issue miniseries. But Mark Millar, Pepe Larraz, The Big Game.
Gotta respect that recommendation. Love that. A decade ago, this phenomenal creator graced us with this story, and I don't know why I don't know why they repackaged it now, but I'm not mad at it because I'm glad to have it in this form, and that is Godzilla by James Stokoe, the deluxe edition.
About damn time.
It's been 10 years already. Holy shit.
Yeah, 10 years. The 5-issue miniseries Godzilla Half Century War was published back in 2012. I think it ended in January or February of 2013. And as I said, I don't know why IDW decided to do it now, but I'm glad that they did. They gave us a beautiful hardcover collection of the 5 issues, along with Stokoe's issue of Godzilla in Hell. And again, I don't know that like putting that issue in here made all that much sense, other than the fact that it's another Godzilla book drawn by Stokoe. But either way, the Half Century War is phenomenal stuff. And, I hope I don't have to tell our audience about how great James Stokoe is. And this is one of those things of chocolate and peanut butter, right? I mean, Stokoe was born to draw a kaiju book. And this book is just an absolute blast. For those that don't remember it, it's called the Half Century War because it chronicles a gentleman by the name of Ota Murakami, who was in the story on site for the initial attack by Godzilla of Tokyo in 1954, and he spends the next 50 years through various and sundry roles in the military and the government in fighting Godzilla and other kaiju for 50 years until it all comes to a glorious head. And everybody's in here, all of Vince's favorites. I think, Vince, I remember when these pages came for art, and I thought, man, I'm like, this is one. There was a double page spread with Hedorah, and I thought, well, this should be on Vince's wall. But Megalon's in there, Mothra, Rodan, obviously Hedorah, Batra. There's a issue with Space Godzilla and Mecha Godzilla. It's just great. It's absolutely great, and I like the undercurrent of having the human antagonist that we see going from young, baffled, cadet, like what the hell's going on here, to grizzled, hardened life, the world, like nihilistic old man who's still fighting the fight. And it's just awesome stuff. I mean, anytime Stokoe draws something, it's worthy of time and attention, regardless of what it's about. But this is one of his certainly better projects over the years, and I'm glad it's in this form. Speak of spot varnish, it's a beautiful spot varnish of Godzilla Gojira on the cover. It's a pink glossy hardcover with white lettering. It's really well done. I mean, IDW always does a great job with their collections, and this is no exception. So check it out if you haven't already. Nice.
2 things. You know who else did an issue of Godzilla in Hell?
Wachter, right?
That's right. The aforementioned Dave Wachter. And Dave had a nice bunch of Godzilla issues to his credit as well. Yes. But anyway.
Maybe we'll get a companion of this, the the Godzilla, the Dave Wachter Deluxe Edition.
I hope so, because he did really good work on that stuff. But and number two, there's a delicate balance in Godzilla stories where you have to weigh the human element and the kaiju element in somewhat equal manner. I think where they fail is when they examine the human element a bit too closely, like in Son of Godzilla and that legendary first picture with Walter White was just too heavy on the human stuff, and maybe like 8 minutes of Godzilla. Like, what? We came for Godzilla. So
For sure.
I love it when the kaiju is a little bit out of balance and there's more of it than the human element. But yeah, you're exactly right. Half Century War is a great story.
Yes, sir.
Tom, what should they be reading?
Well, Jason, since you mentioned James Stokoe's Godzilla, that's kind of the comic that made me want to make a Godzilla comic. And on my Patreon, you can see my Godzilla pitch. I drew like almost an entire Godzilla graphic novel as sort of my like Godzilla pitch. It ended up getting rejected by Toho. IDW accepted it, but Toho rejected it. And also on my Patreon, you can see a bunch of Witchman stuff. The aforementioned Witchman. I did a lot of stuff with that. But in your travels, there's a book that I think went under the radar when it came out a few years back, and it's got that sort of like young adult graphic novel aesthetic, but it the concept behind it is really strong, and the execution is really strong. It's called Complete the Quest, The Poisonous Library by Brian McLaughlin. And what he does here is he makes this sort of hybrid between graphic novel and RPG board game kind of thing.
Wow.
And it's really pretty amazing. And so you can play it as a game to like whatever degree you want, or you can just sort of read it as a graphic novel and kind of, look at all the various paths you can take. But it's got sort of standard kind of like comics pages, and then you'll get to a point where you see like a little landscape with multiple paths, and then describing the little the different like dragons, the sand snake, and various creatures that you have to fight, and ways that you might have to get past them, and just really like super inventive, super fun to look at. Very funny too. There's a lot of humor in some of the like monster designs and things, but and it's just like a very richly conceived fantasy world. I mean, obviously cut from that sort of Dungeons and Dragons cloth, but also like with some like very original twists. It doesn't. It sort of touches on some of the cliches of the genre, but then also subverts them and plays around with it. Just I was kind of blown away by it. I really enjoyed it quite a bit, and I haven't really heard anybody talking about it. So and it kind of combines two things I'm obsessed with: comics and sort of like RPG board game. That whole world. So definitely worth checking out. It's I can't even tell what the publisher is. It's I guess one of these it's called Imprint. So I don't know if that's an imprint of some other larger publisher or that's that's it. But it's from Imprint. It's Complete the Quest, The Poisonous Library, Brian McLaughlin. I think the original title was intended to be This Book is Poisoned. And that would be sort of part of the.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe the publisher kind of had didn't want to put out a product that said that it was poisonous.
Nice. Yeah, it's available on the Amazons.
Yeah,
so.
Guess who just ordered it?
This guy right here.
This guy right here.
Oh, snap.
It looks great.
It does.
Holy crap. How did I not?
Now that's a nice recommendation. Look at that.
Yeah, how did I not know about this?
Well, it's an all ages book. I'm not even sure. It doesn't even look like because of the. I would bet it wasn't even in previews.
I remember that cover from somewhere. Maybe it was in previews.
Could be.
But I'm going for the hardcover.
Look at you.
Yeah, that's how I roll. Thank
Beat
you, Tom.
yourself.
Yeah.
Well done, Tom. Yes.
Check
Tom,
out.
it looks like you have a YouTube video about your Godzilla pitch as well on your YouTube.
I did, yeah. I think maybe every page of it is in that Godzilla pitch too. So I mean, is in that YouTube video. But yeah, it was just one of those. Like I spent because I love Godzilla, and during pandemic and stuff, pencils down and everything. I kind of went deep with it, and I'm super proud of it. And it's sort of seen the light of day, as a result of the YouTube videos and stuff, but yeah, it was a ton of fun.
Nice. Yeah, I'll post a link. I'll make sure we'll post a link to this too when we post the episode.
Excellent. All right, everybody, we got to thank Tom for being here with us. It was awesome as expected.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you at Heroes next year. Hopefully, maybe
that would be great. I'd love to get back to Heroes, and it is one of those, like, planning for cons. It's kind of like you have to plan so far in advance, and it's like, I don't know. But then when the show rolls around, it's like, oh man, I wish I was going. So
you and the Pittsburgh boys can just hop in a car and go to Heroes together. That's easy, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, those guys have a lot of gear. If you see their setup at shows now, it's it takes up a lot of space. So I don't know if there's room for me.
Oh damn!
Car.
You got ousted for podcasting gear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not right.
That's not right.
No.
I'll find my way there somehow.
All right. Nice.
All right, everybody, you know the drill. Go to your comic shops, buy some stuff, read them, talk about them, love them, and then come to the Facebook page and talk to them about them with us. We're always there to, well, most of us are there to experience it. And in the meantime, you know what we're going to say. Say good night. What's his name?
David.
Jimmy?
David Diggs.
Fred? No, it's David.
Fred Durst.
Nah. Fred Durst is the worst.
Chocolate starfish.
It's so fitting that his name rhymes with worst. Never got into that.
What?
What was it? Limp Bizkit. Just not a fan. Even in their heyday.
I gotta admit, as much as I don't think I ever listened to a Korn song, at least willingly or knowingly, I definitely had a small phase where I listened to a little Limp Bizkit. I can't lie.
I think we're done. I think we're done.
I mean, again, it was a small window, but I was of a certain age, it just...
Yeah. What happened to Dap? Where is he?
I don't know. I'm waiting for him to say good night, David.
He's on there.
That was weird. No, I did a Jason and I hit mute.
Oh.
Do I got to do it again then?
So no. I heard it. I got the. We're good. No, I thought I had said it, and
no.
That's okay. So it. Good night.
Captain Kronos had the time dial all wound up, so
no doubt.
He's got the exact second. He's and.
No, but I thought it was because I choked when he had said Fred Durst. I threw up my mouth a little bit when I started the good night, but obviously nobody heard that.
Nice.
Because I was on mute. But yeah, no, we're good.
That's fucked up.
Always tastes better the second time, I think.
It depends.
Yeah, and this is the last episode of the month. We got an episode on the 4th, and then we'll have we'll be live. We'll have a live episode on the 11th.
And to clarify, that just means we're all in the same room. It'll still be released after we're done.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, we'll be live together in the same room. But you won't be hearing it live, unfortunately.
Right.
We're not there yet.
We'll get to see Jason roll his eyes whenever we say something, but
yes.
You won't be able to see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless one of us records that.
Tell Tom how much you love him and the listeners.
Love him tons.
Tons. It's really, it's genuinely great to have him back. Hopefully it won't be as long between visits this time.
Truth.
Yeah, let's make that happen, yeah.
I'll have you back on the John Romita book.
Right, there you go.
Dude, if you do Buscema book, shit, I'll give you a forward for it.
Well, I mean, John Romita, that's like a pure face. Like that is like there's no controversy there. Like everybody's coming out of that book in love with John Romita. Just
that's
such
true.
a great guy.
Yeah, there are. I mean, and like, yeah, Archie Goodwin too. There aren't too many comic pros where somebody is just like legitimate. Everybody says, or all like Ringo. Like everybody's in agreement. But like these three dudes are like the legitimately sweetest guys in comics.
No, you're right. Yep. Yeah, it's not like James Warren
or John Byrne.
That'd be an interesting one.
Byrne?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, controversial for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, as a fan, as somebody who read most of his comics growing up, that is definitely a book I would read. It may not change my opinion of the man that I acquired later years, but it would still be, because at least obviously I wasn't alive for the beginnings of Stan's or even Jack's beginnings, but someone like Byrne, I started reading shortly after he became a mainstream professional, and so a lot of that I would remember, I'd be able to recall as I'm reading it, not unlike Tom's two books.
Yeah. I can imagine the Jim Shooter book would move about 6 copies.
I was thinking about that when this morning when I was like, okay, we're gonna have Tom on tonight, and I'm like, I wonder what could be next. And I says, well, Shooter'd be interesting because like he started writing like before he was 16. He was sending in submissions to DC, and then of course the whole Secret Wars thing. And I can only imagine how many pages would be devoted to what he did at Marvel, and his 9 or so years as editor. I'm just like, but yeah, it Shooter would be interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, and it has that great kind of start of like this kid, getting work at the like it's just such a fun story, like in the beginning, and then it gets complicated as it goes on.
Yeah, because you can have fun with Valiant and then go down to Defiant and Broadway. Yeah, that would be wow.
Yeah, it would be fun, but not profitable.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
That's it for that one.